Seaworld is a theme park and marine zoo in Orlando, Florida. Over the last few decades, Seaworld has been facing much challenge over the way they operate and treat their animals. Today, I go through the truth of Seaworld, its dark history, and why I won't ever visit Seaworld on my next visit to Orlando. Seaworld Orlando opened on the 15th of December 1973, just 2 years after Disney World opened the Magic Kingdom. Just a few years later, the Busch Group bought Seaworld. The Busch Group are famous for owning Discovery Cove, Aquatica, and of course the Busch Gardens theme park in Tampa. Seaworld, among other cooperations, was sending fishermen out into the North American seas, capturing killer whales for many reasons. However, law was changed preventing the fishermen from capturing in North America. Soon after this, they moved to Iceland, where they would soon capture a whale that would change the public view of Seaworld for good. That whale was Tilikum. Born around December 1981 and just being 2 years old, in 1983 was captured by fishermen for the purpose of entertainment for Sealand of the Pacific, another marine zoo in California. Here Tilikum was treated very badly. He would only appear for a few hours a day, and when he wasn't in shows, he was kept in a small container, not much bigger than himself. This is when things start to turn bad. In 1991, a trainee of Sealand of the Pacific slipped and fell into the tank of Tilikum and 2 other killer whales. All 3 of the killer whales prevented the trainee from surfacing the water, causing her to drown and unfortunately die. Soon after this, Seaworld Orlando bought Tilikum knowing his involvement with the death of a human and was moved to Florida in 1992. At the time, people thought that Tilikum would have a better life in Orlando and would be treated better than he was in California. This wasn't to be the case. Just 7 years later, in 1999, Tilikum was involved in his second death. A trespassing man who had visited Seaworld that day waited until after park closing before entering the enclosure. The next morning, the man was found dead in the enclosure. Seaworld claimed that the event was not captured by their many CCTV cameras around the enclosure, and his cause of death was put to drowning. Then, 11 years later, in 2010, the next death caused by Tilikum would change the public view on the welfare of whale trainers forever. Dawn Brancheau, a 40-year-old Seaworld trainer, was performing as normal with Tilikum in the Dine with Shamu show. Then out of nowhere, Tilikum pulls Dawn's ponytail and, similar to other events, pulled her down into the water and subsequently ended up in her drowning. Seaworld claimed that the cause of the event was Dawn's ponytail and she shouldn't have had one. Some, or most, disagree with this. Tilikum was removed from shows until March 2011, where after Dawn's deaths, trainers were no longer permitted to have close contact with the orcas. Since this restriction was put in place, there were no other deaths caused by Tilikum. Seaworld members of staff were trained to falsely claim the following: that orcas live longer in captivity due to the medical care they can provide. This is false. Orcas in captivity may only live up to 10 years, whereas in the wild, some female orcas can live up to 100 years old, most having the same lifespan as humans in the wild. That the famous flopped fin of Tilikum is a rare phenomenon. This is also false. Before being placed in captivity, Tilikum's fin was straight, and slowly over time the fin was becoming more bent. The bent fin is a sign of stress, depression, and anger of the orca. That the orcas were found to be hurt, rescued, and cared for by Seaworld. As we know, this is false. Seaworld capture or purchased whales from captivity and bred them. Tilikum has 21 offsprings, all sent into captivity. I'm not necessarily blaming the staff of Seaworld for the lies that they tell, but they are in a way brainwashed to believe this stuff. The high authorities of Seaworld and the Busch Group need to be held accountable for this. The documentary Blackfish, available to watch on Netflix, explains in further detail of Seaworld and the harm they cause to the environment. The last time I visited Seaworld was about 8 years ago in 2013. It wasn't until after my family and I had watched Blackfish that I realised what Seaworld had done to the animals, how they were treated, and the horrific events that took place. Since watching the documentary, I have never returned to Seaworld and I'm not planning to ever again. Even after the events of everything that happened, orcas and other marine wildlife like seals and dolphins continue to be mistreated in Seaworld. In 2017, Tilikum died in Seaworld as a result of a bacterial infection, a common cause of death of orcas held in captivity. He was just 35. The National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, claims that male orcas can live up to 60 years of age. Therefore, Tilikum's lifespan was potentially halved for the entertainment of humans and the lack of care from SeaWorld. By visiting SeaWorld or any of the Bush Group parks, you are funding the captivity and, let's face it, torture of the animals. Don't go to SeaWorld, do the right thing, and SeaWorld needs to close. Of course, this is my own opinion that is constantly being agreed with others. The welfare of animals needs to be higher if SeaWorld wants to continue the current popularity they are at. If it means removing all the marine wildlife and replacing it with roller coasters, they could see the return from many guests that are boycotting the park.